I remember the exact television set, where I was standing when I first saw that scene. We'll never forget it. You know, it will always be with me.
Hello. Do you want to play a game?
What's your favorite scary movie?
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
See dead.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Here's Johnny.
The power of Christ compels you! The power of Christ compels you!
Whatever you do, don't fall asleep.
Welcome to Talking Horror with Jamie and Nikisha.
Hi, I'm Jamie.
And I'm Nikisha, and this is Talking Horror with Jamie.
And Nikisha.
Where we share our love for all things scary and talk horror through the lens of human behavior. Well, welcome everyone.
Welcome.
We got our lenses on. We're ready to go. Also, good evening, Clarice. Whoa.
Nikisha, that's not my name. I just introduced myself.
Oh, sorry. Good evening, Jamie. Well, if you haven't guessed it, today we are talking about the 1991 psychological horror thriller film, The Silence of the Lambs. And you have to do the article because I put Silence of the Lambs. You have to put the in front of it. It's a whole thing. Yes.
Anthrax Island. That was an especially nice touch, Clarice. Yours?
Yes.
Yeah. That was good. Pity about poor Catherine, though. Tick-tock, 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 tick-tock.
Your anagrams are showing, Doctor. Louis' friend. Iron sulfide, also known as fool's gold.
Oh, Clarice, your problem is you need to get more fun out of life.
Super excited to talk about this movie, which is really crazy. In the however many seasons we are in right now, we're in season 5, and this is our first time covering
this. Is season 8. I think we're in season 8. You did.
Whoops.
Time is a construct, okay? We're here. I'm in the present moment with you guys. Yes.
Okay, fair deal. Fair.
Great. So this movie was directed by Jonathan Demme and written by Ted Talley, and it is adapted from Thomas Harris's 1988 novel of the same name. It stars the incredible Jodie Foster and Anthony Hopkins. So heavy spoilers.
Demme.
Oh, Demme, not Dem. My bad.
God
damn. Well, Demi Moore, Oscar winners, all in the same thing. It's all connected. So heavy spoilers if you've missed the last 30 years of your life and have not seen The Silence of the Lambs. You might want to get on that, you know? And to help us out, because if you're watching us on the YouTubes, you're probably like, who is this fourth person there with us? We have a special guest. I'm going to let producer Brian introduce him.
Sure. He's been a guest before. We've been guests on his podcast, The Best Picture Cast. So this is the perfect opportunity for us to unlock his mind and see what's inside. Kieran Black, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, guys. Yeah. Awesome to be back. Here we go. There are the graphics.
Yeah.
Someone triggered them. Yeah, it's great to be back. Last time I was here, we were talking a little Stephen King and a little Frank Darabont in The Mist. So that was fun. We're ratcheting it up a bit here, going up a notch here with Silence of the Lambs. I'm honored to be asked to come on for this great film. Spoiler alert. I was kind of shocked that you guys hadn't done it yet with all the many films you've covered at this point. So right place, right time. Happy to be here.
And you did this as like one of your first like 10 episodes, right? Like a couple years ago.
Yeah, about 5 years ago. This was like one of our, I think it was like episode 6 or 7. So it's a very old episode. It's been a while since I've gotten to talk about this in a podcast. So I'm excited to refresh my views. I watched it today on this beautiful Criterion collection, Blu-ray 4K. So that was exciting. And it was a great Monday watch. You know, let's start the week with a little nectar.
Yeah,
fantastic.
Just a little nectar.
A little nectar. That was Lou Bega's original song, and then he went with Mambo Number 5.
A little bit of nectar in my mouth.
Exactly.
Yes.
So tell us, for those of our listeners who don't really know what the Best Picture cast is, tell us a little bit about what y'all are doing over there.
Sure. Best Picture cast, we cover all of the Best Picture winners. So we don't do them in any set order. So we're bouncing from the 30s to the 2010s to the 60s, all around. We've been going for 5 years now. We're on our 6th season. And I think we're up to our 80th Best Picture winner or so. We just had our Forrest Gump episode drop. So
so fun.
Yeah. So it was a lot to talk about there in that one. We've covered a bunch. We've covered both Godfathers. We've covered, like I said, Silence of the Lambs. If you want to go back to our episode 5 years ago and hold what I said then to what I said today, feel free. Our archives are there for you. And yeah, we do some fun stuff along the side. In spooky season, we'll do a horror tournament and pick the winner there. You guys have been involved in that before.
I'm going to win because I don't want to come on your podcast like on an episode until I win that thing.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I have not won yet either. So,
so I'm screwed. Great.
Does that? It makes you feel better or worse?
Yeah, I don't know. It definitely makes me feel good, but yeah, it's competitive over there with that. So we do our specialty episodes too. So it's not all Best Picture winners there. We have covered it from a horror sense. We've covered Halloween. We've covered The Thing. We've covered The Shining. So there's been, I think, The Ring won this year. We did kind of like a sub 50 horror tournament, like below 50% on Rotten Tomatoes, and The Ring took that home. So we've had a few horror films under our belt here.
Nice.
Wonderful.
Yeah. Well, we're super excited to have you here and talk about this, especially all of the Oscar things dealing with this particular movie since the Oscars just passed. And I'm sure we'll get into all of that, all the things that this has won, because this is also one of the movies that won in all 5 categories, one of the few that have won in all 5 categories. So we'll get into all of that. But before, because we really need to hit this, Jamie, the trigger warnings, because there's so many.
Yes. Be forewarned, everybody listening. So to start, this film features cannibalism. Yes.
Oh,
I think I watched the wrong one.
I didn't get that at all. I know.
This film also features serial killers. There's a lot of insides on the outside. There's skin being cut and turned into a skin suit, one of my delightful irrational fears. There is semen being flung in someone's face, pretty gross. There's a head in a jar. There's moths lodged in throats. There's like references to trauma, more eating of faces, more death. It's not like,
and the C word.
Oh yes, the C word.
The C word.
She's called the C word.
Like see you next Tuesday.
Yes.
Charisma, uniqueness, nerve, and talent.
Oh, of
course. That's it, Brian. That's it.
Fun fact: I've been watching RuPaul's Drag Race for years and didn't realize that's what it meant until like last year.
Really?
That's what, like I consider myself smart. That went right over my head.
Yes.
Oh my god. Yeah, what else? I mean, references to like not murdering, but like animal death.
Gooey autopsies too.
Oh god.
Very gooey.
Great.
Ohio.
Yeah.
Just Ohio.
Gunshots.
Mm-hmm.
Bodies underwater.
Mm-hmm.
Night vision goggles. That might.
Night vision goggles. Those are
yeah.
Yes.
The FBI.
Like hoarding, that house is pretty gross.
It's
even without the
gross.
pit in the basement.
Right.
Also not great.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I guess like also like power dynamics. like
Mm-hmm.
female to male power dynamics that could be
Mm-hmm.
off-putting
Misogyny.
in the workplace specifically.
Yeah.
Oh, bad psychiatrists, bad mental health
Oh
professionals.
yeah,
All
duh.
bad.
On the
Very
list.
bad.
All of them.
On
Yes.
the list.
All different kinds
Yes.
of bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All different kinds of bad. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Insane. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if that's all the trigger warnings.
Oh, and good quotes. If you hate good quotes,
Oh God.
then you can't watch this movie.
I definitely have some quotes in
Yes.
my likes.
This movie was way funnier than I remember it being. But in that Jonathan Demme way, like if you've seen his like actual comedies like before this, like yeah. I went through a phase where I watched every single Jonathan Demme movie like a freaking nut job. So I did.
Hey, you like what you like.
I like what I like.
Yes.
I was like,
Gorgeous.
Eating people? What else has this guy made? No.
You piqued my interest. Let's go
Yeah.
further. Great. Well, let's get right into it. We need a plot summary, though, of this. And since we have a special guest, Kieran is going to give us our 2-minute plot summary.
What's the plot?
Jamie is
boy.
going to time you. We have faith in you. You got
Here
it.
we go. Big stakes.
I
here
was
in
like,
this
in
one.
me for timing it?
Yeah. Last time I had
And
to do
you.
The Mist, which is a little lower stakes than Silence of the Lambs. You know, you
Fair.
just kinda
Oh, yeah.
Roll through,
Yeah.
grocery store, Mist, everybody dies. Go.
Yes.
All right. Okay, here we go. I got 2 minutes of the Sounds of the Lambs. I'm ready here.
All right, ready? And I'll give you I'll throw up my 1 minute warning, and then I will count down 10 seconds.
Okay.
So hopefully that's, you'll do great.
Give me the starting gun, and I'm ready to go.
All right, ready, steady, go.
Okay, Clarice Starling is an FBI agent in training, and she's called up to the big leagues by her mentor, and he's trying to catch serial killer. Buffalo Bill is out there skinning women, and we got to get him. And his plan to get him is he's going to send the rookie in to interview the famous serial killer, Hannibal Lecter, Hannibal the Cannibal. So in goes Clarice to talk to Hannibal, and they just hit it right off. 2 peas in a pod with a pane of glass in between them. They really get close to each other. While that's going on, we learned that the senator's daughter is kidnapped, listening to Tom Petty, and she's tossed in the back of a van. Then she ends up in a basement in a hole with a poodle and a basket and some lotion, and it's bad times for her. So we go back to our cannibal and our rookie FBI in training, and they're getting closer. He's given a little nugget here or there about it. She's sharing with him some trauma, some daddy trauma, some farm animal trauma, and sure enough, we're getting closer to where we need to be. All while this is happening, and we're figuring out where Buffalo Bill is. Hannibal Lecter's transferred. While he's transferred, he escapes, kills 2 cops, bunch of people in an ambulance. He's in the wind. Now we're getting closer here. The FBI's triangulated the spot. They're in one spot. Clarice is in the other. Turns out Clarice picked the right door, and now she's in the house in the basement with Buffalo Bill. He's got night vision goggles in the dark basement. She doesn't. Not a great situation, but she's got really good hearing, so she can spin around and shoot him before he shoots her. And she saves the day, saves the senator's daughter, saves the poodle, saves the cheerleader, and we are good to go. We're going to have a little FBI graduation. We're going to get a phone call, and it is Lecter, and he's on a remote island, and he's about to have an old friend for dinner. The lambs are silenced, and we are done.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
With seconds
With time
to spare.
Yeah, great
A
job.
pro. Exciting times.
And I
Wow.
left
Great.
nothing out.
No.
Right.
Nothing.
That's the plot.
Truly.
Truly nothing. Well, let's
And
get
a
into
gooey autopsy, too, was in there.
And a gooey
Oh,
autopsy.
right. Well, we got to get into the gooey details, but first, did we even like it? Here's our first segment. I know Jamie hates gooey. Now I'm going to use it for the rest of the episode. So let's see if we even liked it. Here's our first segment, Trick or a Treat.
Trick. Treat.
Where we tell you, trick, we hated it, it was a trick, or we don't know how to feel about it, or if it was a flat out delicioso gooey treat. Jamie, go first.
I mean, I hate that I'm using this word, but it was a gooey treat. It sure was.
Gorgeous Kieran, what about you?
At Best Picture Cast, we cover all the Best Picture winners, and I consider this to be one of the very best of the best. So this is absolutely a treat, a gooey treat indeed.
Yes.
This is a big time thumbs up for me, this film.
Gorgeous. Producer Brian.
Yeah, this is a 5-star movie. This is, I agree with Kieran. This is a top 10 Best Picture winner, if not top 3.
Yeah, unanimous. The best to do it. The acting alone. But we'll get into all of the details of it with our segment Likes and Gripes.
And now our likes and gripes.
So Kieran, since you are our guest, please go first. Give us all your likes and gripes about this movie. Also, if you would like to, and we would love you to, talk about all the Oscar association with this movie.
Sure. So likes and gripes. One of the and most of my gripes with this film are little nitpicky sort of plot things that I'm sure we can talk about, but I'll have to start with the likes. And one of the episodes of yours that I listened to prepare for this was The Substance, which came out this year, and a horror film nominated for Best Picture. That's always fun to see. I know there's a limited amount. Brian, you've done a couple clips on the ones that have been and the ones that haven't been. And one of the things you talked about on that episode was title cards. And this has a very famous title card for me. That opening scene in the foggy woods where she's on that FBI obstacle course and we just get hit with the Silence of the Lambs. That image has always stuck with me from the start of the movie. And that, to me, is one of my biggest likes in this film, is that it just gets ambiance. Everything about this film gets the mood and the setting and the terrain that you're going to be in. We start in that foggy woods. We're going to end up in a jail dungeon. We're going to end up in a basement with a hole in it. But the way the camera presents it to us, the score, that whole mood that is created from us right from the very start, sets this movie apart from so many other famous movies, not even just within the horror genre, but just within film in general.
Yeah.
I mean, for Brian to say that it could be considered a top 3, I mean, I don't think that's a bold statement, because there's no part of this movie that isn't executed with the ultimate perfection that they envisioned.
Yeah, definitely a lot of intention going in. And I just want to piggyback off the atmosphere, because that was one of the first things that I put in my likes too, Kieran, was how everything was shot and how it just makes you feel like you are immersed immediately in the atmosphere, in the tone, like you said, the forest, but then even them going room to room in the FBI building, as she's walking to go and meet her boss. And then when we get to the asylum and just the grit and the grime and seeing all of the bars. And I love the first person points of view shots through it too. So it makes you feel like you're walking through those places as they're setting up all of the detailed atmosphere. So everything is so intentional, which just makes you so invested in it because you feel like you are literally in the scene with everybody.
So the two things that we're talking about now, like cinematography. So Tak Fujimoto did this movie, who did most of Jonathan Demme's movies and was an early collaborator, did with M. Night Shyamalan. So he did The Sixth Sense, and he did Signs and stuff like that. But he also did a lot of Jonathan Demme's comedies, like Married to the Mob and Something Wild. So he has that, and he also did That Thing You Do. So he's and he's a million other things. He's retired now, but it's just fascinating. However, he's never won an Academy Award. He wasn't even nominated for this movie, which is freaking insane. But also on the flip side, Jonathan Demme, one of his signature camera moves is that actor looking directly into the camera as if you're the person talking to them. Very effective, especially in Philadelphia, which was his next movie after this. But he does in all of his movies, and it really draws you in, and especially in those Clarice and Hannibal scenes, you can't look away, because you feel like if you're looking away, you're not paying attention to you're not paying attention because they're talking to you. It's incredibly effective, like you said, Nikisha, to make you more invested in those sequences and really empathize with those characters too. even if they're looking at you with like these cold, beady eyes.
Especially because most of the time when we see Hannibal, it's behind bars or behind a mask, and it just creating that sense of atmosphere of who this person is, and bringing you in, like seeing this person through the bars, but still with those, like you said, Brian, those cold, beautiful actor eyes that don't blink at all. And I'm like, how are you not tearing up right now? Because have you blinked yet? I don't think you have. This is incredible. Like it's so fun to watch, just them acting together. Yeah, and Kieran, please keep going.
We get them those same shots. We get them also when she's talking to Crawley, played by Scott Glenn. When and you get the perspective of a young female FBI agent in training who's now being confronted by her, essentially her mentor, someone she really looks up to, requests to be involved with. And you get the intensity of that moment by the close-ups of his face, just like you get it with Anthony Held's character when he's sexually harassing her about, when she's there to interview Lecter, and he's like trying to take her out on the town, and you're so attractive, and it's like we get his face right up in our grill. Very, very unsettling and uncomfortable, and to think that you're going to be confronted moments later by an actual cannibal serial killer in the same sort of lens is a very cool transition. Cool in a film sense, not in a real life sense, of course.
Yes, for sure.
But yeah, love all of that stuff. And I was really struck by Howard Shore's score this time around. This is the guy who scored the Lord of the Ring movies and get fully rewarded there with that. But it really adds so much to that mood, and like a good score, knows when to shut the fuck up. And go silent, and use silence as a tool, and not just constantly hitting.
Did someone say silence?
Silence of the score.
Yes.
Yeah. So, and this is a movie that could so easily be procedural, right? That's going to be like the magic word with these types of movies, cop procedurals.
Yes.
And this, for me, The Silence of the Lambs never goes down that route, and one of the attributes I can give to that is just these little moments throughout the film, these little touches. Quite literally, one is a little touch with him, just
touching
grazing her hand. Yeah. Little things like that. Little things like the nice suit, Senator. Just little moments to make you go, oh, God, I got to Google that later. I got to figure out what's going on here. It never kind of goes through the motions. There's always a little touch here or there to keep you offbeat. Oh, God, there's some symbolism there. Oh, there's a metaphor there. Oh, they're trying to do something here. And a really great film manages to do that without it getting in the way of the story and what they're trying to say. And to me, Demme really just executes all that perfectly here.
Yeah, I think on that note, something I wrote in my notes is this is the ultimate show, don't tell movie, where like just the opening sequence of her training harder than everybody else. Then she gets into an elevator with 3 very tall men, and she's the only woman in there. This movie sets the themes visually without actually like saying anything like, well, you're the only woman in this the crew, right. And now I'm like, you don't get these like obnoxious explanations and exposition. You just get the story, and all of these things that these characters are dealing with and feeling are just shown to you. They're not, they're shown to you. They're not told to you.
Yes.
And I think that makes this so much more impactful, because then you can focus on the plot and just know that these other things are weighing heavily on these characters and inform their every single motivation and justification.
Yeah. Love it. Any other thoughts, Kieran, about this?
Oh, geez. I mean, I could go on and
all
on
the things.
and on. But I think just to kind of go on to what Brian was saying too, is a lot of the violence we get is off screen. There's he pulls off the face and he's in the ambulance, and then we immediately cut to them just saying, oh yeah, they found the ambulance in a lot. The crew is dead, and he also killed the tourist. So we're tacking on without the imagery of it. We do kind of see the undoing of the 2 police officers who let him loose, and there's a lot of kind of violent imagery, but not a ton of violence in a really violent movie as far as what the topic it's covering.
Yeah,
Maybe
go ahead.
just quickly, Jamie and I were talking about how when he lures her into the van, him hitting her over the head and knocking her out is hidden behind the door in the side of the van. Like another director would have shown the woman getting abused and hit, but this one at least blocks it, because you still want to see his violent nature, but you don't have to see the violence to recognize that he is capable of doing those things.
Yeah. I mean, I was going to say basically the same thing, but it just reminds me of like, this movie feels like the antithesis of a Saw, where like Jigsaw you would see like the face being pulled off, or, you know, any of all those other like slashers. But for this, there's not really a need for it, because and they're very smart about what to show you, like you said, Kieran, like the guards' bodies, you know, being especially the one that's like hung up and you see his insides coming out, or seeing the head in the jar. But it's all after fact. It's not any action that's happening. So I think it's kind of nice settling in on not actually seeing the violence, just seeing the aftermath of it. So it's just like gory and unsettling enough, but we didn't have to actually experience that, especially because this movie was so first person point of view focused. I think it would have taken a lot away from it to actually see a lot of those actions. But Kieran, you mentioned that there was a couple of gripes that were just little tiny things. Would you like to share those with us?
Yeah, like anything, I mean, you know, there's always some room for nitpick in some of these plot heavy films. And, you know, I one of them that always drives me crazy is that, you know, that we're emphasizing all of these rules that you have to follow around Hannibal Lecter, but none of these guys follow any of them. You know, leaving the pen around, or turning your back to it, getting too close with him. But like, come on, like how many times did you say no pens or pencils, and we're just going to leave a pen in his cell on the shelf, and that's like the main warden is doing that,
right?
They may be trying to make a point within that, saying, you know, these guys are the guys who make all the rules, but aren't the ones that follow them.
Sure.
So there could be a piece of that. You know, this is always a classic film. It's like, how are you going in there with no backup? You know, let's make a call, have a cop car behind you, have something.
Yes.
But and again, you know, like a nitpick, you can battle it. You know, she's hungry to save this girl, or you know, so those little types of plot nitpicks. Could you really hear the clicking of a gun and spin around and fire off in the darkness?
All your shots in like 5 seconds.
Right.
Yeah. But I try not to let any of that interfere with my love and joy for the movie.
Yeah. You mean you can't see in the dark, Kieran? So you can shoot in the gun?
I can't see in the light.
And me talking with glasses on because I can't even get the blue light. Gorgeous. Well, Jamie, would you like to go? Give us some of your likes and gripes with this?
Sure. I mean, a lot, you know, that was said, I wholeheartedly agree with. I also like, there's some really curious and interesting like mental health subjects that are addressed in this, and I have not read the original like novel. I don't. Yeah. I've only watched. I've only watched this, and then I watched some of season 1 of Hannibal, and I didn't watch any of the other movies because when I saw this, that was still in my like I'm trying to get more comfortable with horror movies phase, and at the time I was like, oh, this isn't nearly as gory as like what I think, you know, other movies that I could have been watching were. And then all of the sequels I think are significantly more gory, which I think is also that was part of what Brian and I were talking about, is like of the times that the sequels were released compared to the original. Like the original, I'm sure, was mind-blowing and probably like extremely violent for 1991, and then I haven't seen the sequel or the prequels or anything like that, but like coming out in the early 2000s, I my understanding is that like it was, you know, ramped up significantly, and that really freaked me out this time, so I just like avoided it. But even this in and of itself was always very scary to me. But you know, I think that there's other storylines that don't care to go too in depth about like the psychology of a character. Like, you get that in movies, but I think it's very surface level typically, because they're assuming that most lay people who are watching a movie aren't necessarily going to understand, like, the deeper psychological motivations of a character. But this one does go deeper, because they kind of talk about how, like, this is somebody who thinks that they might be trans, and it's like that brings up a lot of really interesting things that you could get into. And like, I kind of was thinking about, like, is this what do we think about the representation of the trans identity, and like, feeling misgendered versus the way that Hannibal Lecter is perceiving it, is like, this is a person who's experienced a significant amount of trauma. And then he doesn't really get too much into it, but he just kind of says, like, this person is not trans.
Yes. Right.
And like, that is like, we just kind of get that. But I was like, wow, you don't really get, like, just the fact that he even gave this other explanation of, like, this is a person who's experienced a significant amount of trauma, which then kind of goes into the, like, is this a person who was, like, born with, the sociopathic urges that he has, or is this a person who was made based on whatever childhood experiences, et cetera, et cetera. And like, again, that's just so much more and like meatier than I feel like a lot of other movies that there is references to mental health, or like that you have your psychiatrist who's like here to explain, oh, this person's mentally ill, that's why they're a killer. But yeah, we don't always get the, like, trauma made them a killer. And I just find that really, really fascinating.
With that much, like, vocabulary too that they use in describing
and even
it.
It's like both a lot, like, you get enough without kind of like just going too in the weeds of, like, let me go into why and blah 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 blah. So I think that they do it in a very effective way, in a deeper way that other films don't. And yeah, I really liked the way that they did that. Whether or not I think that continues to be, like, an accurate and appropriate representation, but I just like that they kind of went for something a little bit more than just surface level, and like kind of gave it some backing. But I also imagine, like, when your main antagonist is a mental health professional, you kind of have to, like, give us a little bit more than just, like, he's a serial killer, like, because he's also a serial killer. So it's
and one of the top psychologists, they were saying, before all this happened. So it's like, you got to give him a scene to express that, this is why he is top of his profession,
Which that I would say maybe is like a tiny bit of a gripe. Like, yes, we are getting this character who is incredibly manipulative, but I do think that they credit some of how he is behaving maybe slightly more to the fact that he's a mental health provider and less to the fact that, like, he's just a sociopath.
Yeah, I get that.
And I did want to clarify that, like, I can't immediately read somebody on first interactions with them just because I'm a mental health professional.
Yeah.
Like, I'm not going to be like, oh, I immediately know all of your childhood trauma and, yada, yada, yada.
And, yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Like, I just read that as, like, he's good at reading people, and that's not necessarily, like, a trait that's associated with being a good mental health professional. I'm sure, but, like, obviously it benefits him. And so, like, choosing that particular career path is also really interesting, because, like, understanding people and what makes them tick to then, help them is terrifying, and again, makes for a really compelling character. But yeah, I don't really have too many other gripes. I'm trying to think. All in all, like, this movie it has instilled that, like, degree of fear in me that every time I rewatch it, and I have several times over, I still am, like, very nervous and uncomfortable, especially, like, the most iconic scenes. Really, the end scene with the night vision goggles, like, actually makes me like nervous every time I watch it.
Mm.
It just like puts you right back into it. And again, I think that's like the filming of like, actually face on being watched. That's very uncomfortable. Um, but yeah, this movie is pretty iconic all around, from everyone involved.
Yeah. And I'll just piggyback off of that, Jamie, because when you were just talking about how much they kind of dive into the mental health of it all and the diagnosing, if you will, of it all, I just liked the empathy that was given towards trans people, because there was a line that Clarice says of like, there's no evidence that shows that trans people are inherently violent. And I just, especially just in the context of the world today, it was just really nice to see that particular representation, especially
Hmm.
in a movie of the early 90s, to not associate a certain group of people with certain violent actions.
Hmm.
So I just really appreciated that.
So
We've already, yeah.
here's a fun fact about this movie.
Hmm.
Even though it's a more empathetic portrayal of trans, like in context and whatnot, this movie in general was a created a certain LGBTQIA stereotype that, like, especially during the beginning or middle of the AIDS pandemic,
Mm.
that Jonathan Demme was depressed after this movie and really upset that the movie he made was detrimental to an already villainized group of people because of
Mm.
the AIDS pandemic, which is
Mm.
why he made Philadelphia as an apology to show like the
Oh.
true like empathy and human kindness and like the fight that they're going through as
Hmm.
kind of a follow-up to this movie, which I find like absolutely fascinating. That is that his gripe, his regret was how this characterization, even though it's in the book, a lot of it, like that
Hmm.
he was not more empathetic to the Buffalo Bill character in general.
Mm.
Yeah,
That
and
is
there,
fascinating.
Nikisha, you put it
Mhm.
out there too, in saying that they do address it specifically, and they do say,
Mhm.
this person is not transsexual,
Mhm.
and even in doing that, and in rewatching it, every time I rewatch it, I pay attention closely to those scenes, and it is there in the fine print, but having having that character be even in the same sentence with that at that time in our society was just people just kind of saw the two together and went with it. And
Mm.
Jonathan Demme, as Brian said, to his credit, rather than getting super defensive or arguing, he took a step back and said, listen, whether I like it or not, however it is, this conversation started based on my film, and I need to reflect upon that, because he was genuinely deeply upset that this was creating protests and creating this
Mm.
cloud of negativity there too. So and obviously a very super complicated time period in our country there with the AIDS epidemic in full heat, or in the early
Yeah,
90s.
Hmm.
because I can. It is so interesting learning this information because I didn't know it, because my own personal view of it was like, oh, I'm so glad that they emphasize at least that sentence that Claire Reese says. But I
Totally.
Hmm.
totally can see how somebody could take that scene or that movie in general and interpret it in a negative way.
Yeah.
So it is nice that the director wasn't defensive about how people were receiving it and saying like, I'm sorry. So I mean, a credit to Demi for really listening, as
Hmm.
opposed to, like you said, Kieran, getting on the defense about it, because I absolutely can see how someone can take it in a negative
Because
way.
that's the scene that people forget, like the actual like
Hmm.
interesting meaty conversation about this. People remember the tucking and the like, you want to fuck me, I want to fuck you, like
I was about to
Yeah.
say like that scene is probably one of the most parodied scenes like in movies that I can think of, and like that
Mm.
I wholeheartedly agree that it's like, just because the movie like set out to like put this information out to potentially avoid what ends up happening as a consequence of what else is happening in the movie, like who's paying attention to that scene?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and like always, probably a lot of people within the outrage might not even have seen the film. Just
Yeah.
saw
Also
clips
that.
or heard about it and said, we
100%.
can't have this. Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. That's that 100%.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also, Jamie, to your point too, because I didn't even the tucking scene wasn't even something that stood out to me. The conversation beforehand stood out to me more than that particular scene. So that's just so interesting because that the tucking scene is something, like you said, people parody, and that's what they stuck with. So it's just so interesting, the things that people will hold on to in a sense in watching this movie. But yeah, also just speaking of parodies, completely left field, but every time Hannibal says quid pro quo, I kept thinking of Austin Powers, because there's a scene where
yeah.
Quid pro quo, and then Austin's like, yeah, squid pro row. A funny thing that I just keep thinking about. Also, just the Mandela effect of the good evening Clarice as opposed to the hello Clarice, because a lot of people parry hello Clarice, and that is always just so interesting to me, like watching it, that's actually what he says is good evening. Just a little bit about the acting, because everything else that y'all have talked about, I agree with. I love this movie. It's absolutely incredible. But one thing that I just want to share, because I'm in a class for TV film acting right now, and the teacher talks a lot about 5 sensory pictures in acting. So instead of like trying to find a trauma that relates to the scene so you can act it out, he talks about acting in sensory pictures. What am I smelling? What am I seeing? What am I feeling? What am I tasting? And how is that informing how I'm acting? And I say that to say, every time we have these close-ups, you can really see that form of acting, especially in Jodie Foster, when they have the whole conversation about Hannibal asking her about the lamb and running away. And you can just see her going through the pictures in her brain as she is describing it to him, which to me just draws me into her acting even more, because like how she is reacting with just little facial expressions is making me see the images too that she's seeing in her brain. And I just thought it was a really cool, like, connecting moment, and speaks to just how well of an actor Jodie Foster is, especially in that role. And also, can we talk about that accent, because it's stellar? I'm obsessed with it. It's so good, that West Virginia accent. It's absolutely amazing. But yeah, I think we've all mentioned everything else. A little like tidbit: the Bon Appetit magazine that was in the cell in Memphis. I just thought in Hannibal's cell right before he gets the guards. That was really, really cheeky. Cheeky, pun intended, because he bit off his cheek. And yes, that's it. I also just will never understand the fact of just talking about mental health professionals. Like, Hannibal is supposed to be this great person in his profession, and still, with all the knowledge that he has, still decides in his brain that it's okay to just kill and eat people. It's just such a 2 and 2 not connecting.
Sure.
But a thing to just think about, and that's fun. So that's all I have for that. What about you, producer Brian?
Most of the stuff you said, I totally agree with. I'm just gonna pull some other like little, like Kieran earlier said, like, this movie's all about like the small details. So I want to pull a little bit of those out of my notes. Skins. The chalkboard at the very beginning, when she's walking through the rooms, like, oh, where's Crawford? They're like Homeland board has skins written in all caps and circled on it. And the whole movie, Jamie and I would just turn to each other and they go, skins.
So fucking silly.
I think the pan, the first time she goes into the row of cells and you see crazy person behind bars, crazy person behind bars, crazy person behind bars, calm person behind glass. That contrast is, I will never forget that the first time I saw that. Like, it's gorgeous in every way possible. Sensory, visual, everything. Something, in addition, I mentioned the elevator with the men at the beginning. When she's doing the training and the gun gets put up to her head at the end, I recognize that part of that scene is supposed to inform her to be better at the very end when she's actually in that situation. But my favorite thing about that scene is how she and her male counterpart enter the room at the same time, the same way, and she is the one who gets yelled at. And that is just another another way to show that she is treated differently without being like, you're the woman, you're like, without like saying it like a bad movie would do.
Yes.
I think that my new favorite character is the storage unit owner who like came out who like came from like a different like movie weird, completely. Like, it was like yeah delicious character work there. I also liked the whole sequence where they're like, we're gonna leave her out of the room, and then Crawford explains it in the car later to her, and it makes you trust Crawford but not trust him at the same time, like, because he's been using her the whole time. And then finally at the end she's in on it with the fake deal to Hannibal, so like she kind of earned Crawford's trust as she goes through, but Crawford had to keep a secret from her so that she could get closer. I think to be fair, I'm putting a lot of the Lawrence Fishburne version of Crawford on this in terms of like a more massaged, larger like character arc on this one. But I think Jack Crawford is a fascinating character across all the movies and books and stuff like that, and played very close to the very, very small in this by Scott Glenn, and I was very into that.
Which one was Lawrence in, the prequel or the one right after?
The TV show.
Oh, the TV show. Okay.
Which is a prequel to this in general.
Okay.
And I as a movie lover, as a person who studies film, like as a fucking loser, the old switcheroo, the first time I saw the old switcheroo at the end is a film technique. It's the first time I remember seeing that film technique used, and it knocked my socks off. The subversion, the pulling the rug out, that was truly, as a young like movie person, like developing a taste for, pun intended, taste for movies, like I just thought that the old switcheroo at the end is just like peak filmmaking. When they open the door and like he answers it, I'm just getting chills right now, just like as like a little kid watching this, being like, wow, he was amazing. And then it's all wonderful.
Do you know what that reminds me of? I'm sorry. That switcheroo, and I just thought about it when you were describing it. It reminds me of that moment when you watch Get Out for the first time and the police show up at the end, but then his friend walks out of the car and not the actual police. And it's like,
that's the scariest part of the movie.
And that was the scariest part of the movie. Like, he's about to go to jail. Spoiler alert, Get Out if you haven't watched it. But for me, just that switcheroo moment of like, it's not actually the police, it's his friend. You're just like,
I know. I've never seen it, but I would like to see the original ending that they nixed to do that one.
I literally thought you were about to say I never watched Get Out.
No, we watched it. Yeah, no, I've seen it.
I literally did it.
Like, wait a minute, there's not going to be another
Leprechaun
situation.
This isn't a Leprechaun situation.
No. Leprechaun is next week. I promise we'll watch it. I won't skip it this time.
Oh, God. Okay, sorry. Keep going.
Okay, and then I have a couple of gripes. One is with the Academy, and this is a big gripe that I've never talked about that I'm very excited to talk about my Oscar. My top two Oscar gripes. This is one of them. But before we go there, my one gripe, and this was also my gripe with the TV show, which in tying this all up is probably my gripe with like the novels, which I've never read. It's all too convenient. It's like Hannibal Lecter's patient happened to be dating Buffalo Bill, and that's how he knows all this stuff. Like, and they don't even know who Buffalo Bill is, so it's not like Crawford knew that like he had more information on him. I don't know. That's all just too convenient for me. That like they happen to talk to the right serial. It's like Dexter, where there's a million serial killers in Miami that he finds. Like, it's just a little bit too convenient for me. But I let it go because like it's done really well, but I just think that's a plot device that like doesn't always click. And I know that like there could be lies in there, so it's not all, you can't trust the narration completely, but that always is just like it's a little bit too convenient. And my biggest gripe of this movie is I don't believe that she would have walked into that house at the end and not gotten a gust of a bad smell and been like, oh God, like there's like that house was probably so stinky with all the spoiled milk, and like the dead body
There
in
was
the
like food
basement.
and stuff everywhere.
Food.
Yeah, and then the
Like,
body in the tub.
I think smell would have been a way bigger part of that last sequence. And I get you still need to play that scene out and not be like covering your nose the whole time. Like, I get it's movie magic, but like looking at that house, there's a disconnect between like her breathing and like how the house looks.
In defense,
sure,
we don't know that she didn't get a bad smell. You know, a good investigator or someone who's trying to, you know, she might have. The way that that's shot is we get an, I guess when she kind of unstraps the gun is kind of the moment where she's fully convinced when she sees the butterfly. But we don't know that she's not suspicious immediately. And if she's suspicious immediately, she might walk in and smell something and go, something's wrong here. And I'm not going to let on that I know something's wrong here.
I'll buy that.
Even right
totally
up until she says freeze, she doesn't really give it away when she's like, can I use your phone? Like she's still pretty calm for a rookie. So it shows that there is some instinct there that, hey, you know, I have to have a little bit of a poker face. Might be a bit of a reach, but I'm with you. That house would stink.
Yeah, I'll buy it. Okay, so here is my gripe with the Academy Awards. He won Best Actor. He's a supporting role in this movie. There's no lead actor in this movie. It's her. There are multiple supporting men in this movie. And the Oscars is known to do this over and over and over again, where the villain, the supporting actor villain or supporting actress villain is considered, the studio puts them in for lead actor because of just how the field looks that year or whatever it is. Some examples. The Devil Wears Prada. She is not a lead actress in that movie. She is the supporting actress in that movie. And I'm not talking about number of minutes that they're in the movie. I'm talking about narrative. They are the support in that movie. And she and Anne Hathaway's on it. DuPont in Foxcatcher, the Steve Carell role. He is a supporting actor in that movie. Channing Tatum is the lead actor in that movie.
Definitely agree with that one.
Medicine Time, what's her name? Louise Fletcher is a supporting actress in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, one of the other movies that won all Big Five. Like, Louise Fletcher is not the lead actress in that movie. Just because they're the only woman in that movie or man in that movie does not make them narratively the lead actor or actress in that movie. But it's always the villain characters that are bumped up to the lead actor or actress category. And it's always the non-villain characters, i.e. Kieran Culkin, like this past year, who that's a co-lead of a movie. Like, I know that's more, that you can argue that one a little bit more. Yeah. But like, I just think that the categories, I'm happy you won. Don't get me wrong. It's an incredible performance. But like, because this studio can lobby for which category they get into, like, that's a big gripe of mine. The other one's in the song category. If your song is not in the movie, you should not be nominated. Like, you can't be Common and like write a cool song for the end of Selma and win. Like, that's like horseshit to me. That's horseshit to me. Like, your movie, your Bond movies count because you're part of the opening credits and it sets a vibe. And I guess you can argue that it's the end credits, so it's setting an exit vibe. But I don't know. It's got to be somehow tied to the narrative of it. Anyway, that's my other gripe. But that's my other gripe. It's an Academy gripe. That's one I will always have. It will never change. But that's
I have a question, because do you know how, like, Tony Awards, do they submit for each?
They do, but they can be denied, and they can be. I think the Tonys have more control over which way they go.
Yes.
Like, Kate Winslet won for Best Actress for The Reader. That's a supporting role, like times 10. But it was a much easier field to win to finally get her Best Actress Oscar. Again, actually kind of a villain in some ways. But anyway, that's my parlor talk on that.
Come, sit, have a drink. It's parlor talk.
I just want to offer a quick response if you can, because and I do like acknowledge this is one of those topics that can just be debated on and on and on. Specifically speaking to whether Hannibal Lecter is supporting or lead. it's argued by many, and I'm not looking to go to change anyone's mind here with this. But my defense to that, as to why he is the lead, is that he is the cloak that's over the movie. He is the driving force within the movie. And his presence, though his screen time is super low, and I think one of the lowest ever for a lead, if not maybe David Niven might be lower. But he is constantly present within the film. He's in the back of our minds throughout this whole film. And each time he steps into the camera lens, he reinforces that. So that's kind of an abstract argument there. I'll admit that he's by far the most important lead male in the film.
In that movie, yeah.
I would, this isn't a One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest podcast, but I have to hop into that too. In the Louise Fletcher's defense is that there is a tug of war between the two main entities within the film, and Jack Nicholson's pull in that movie is only as strong as Louise Fletcher's pull back. And there's a bit of that going on here with Jodie Foster and Hannibal Lecter too. So I'm actually okay with all of them being leads. I think in many ways, I think Heath Ledger's a lead in Dark Knight for that same kind of pull. And, to me, he has more impact on the movie than Batman does. But again, we can debate this stuff over. I do agree it's not great that it's these production companies making the decision. There should be some sort of governing force, like I guess you're saying there is in the Tonys. They should be able to veto some of these, because there is some times when it's silly. You brought up The Reader. I think Jeffrey Shine's win in Jeffrey Rush in Shine. Yeah, that's a weird one, because he's really only in half the movie. There's another actor playing the same role during the first half of the movie. And there's endless examples of these things going on and on. But there should be some sort of governing force with checks and balances there.
But the flaw, the Oscars, is the fun part of it.
Oh, God. Yeah,
true.
For sure.
True.
And also, are we going to have this discussion now? Should we discuss that if we think this is an actual horror movie or not?
That's the other end of the debate.
I think so. The question is, and the reason I bring this up is because anytime I post on social media about certain movies, people are just like, "Oh, that's not a horror movie.
Not even a horror movie."
Yeah, Jaws is not a horror movie apparently, and like a couple of other movies. But Silence of the Lambs is one of the movies that always is someone like Silence of the Lambs not a horror movie. Like, is Silence of the Lambs a psychological thriller? Is it a horror movie? What is it to you? Obviously, this is a subjective question.
Going to me first?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Now, I'll preface this by saying I am personally, and this is kind of across the board, when it comes to genre, I'm very loose with rules here. I don't do a lot of genre gatekeeping. To me, Jaws is 1,000% a horror film. To me, Silence of the Lambs is a horror film. But I'll even loosen up. Some people say that Alien isn't a horror film. That's insane to me. It's a horror film, and to me, it's about general mood and vibe. And are we trying to induce dread? And if we're trying to induce dread and terror, then to me, it's a horror film. I think Seven is a horror film. I think you can say Zodiac is a horror film. And these are those in that kind of subgenre procedural thriller world,
Where do you land on Shutter Island?
I would probably, if I had to say, I'd say no. But if someone felt strongly that it was, I wouldn't try to tell them that they're wrong, I would, if you asked me just out of the blue, I would say no, because that one is definitely very psychological. But I think like Requiem for a Dream is a horror movie. Black Swan to me is totally a horror movie. I know that's another one that people say, "Oh, that's not really horror."
That really comes up all the time too. That one,
But like, watch Black Swan again. Like, listen to the score. Wait for the beats and moments. The fingernails. To me, if your fingernail gets ripped off in the movie, it qualifies as horror. Okay,
any body part
trying to see.
Yes.
Being
Syriana.
The body part.
Oh yeah,
You're done.
It's horror.
So
that's where we're at. Yeah.
I'm probably not the best person to ask because I'm super loose with it. But that's kind of how I feel. This is totally a horror movie for me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll agree. I have always known this to be a horror movie, even before I watched this for the first time. And I think it's just what you said, Kieran. It's setting up tone, uh, and I also do believe it's a sense of gore and what they're trying to say through the gore in a movie. Because it's different if you're talking about like an action movie and there's like gore because there's shootouts or whatever the case may be. But I think um, when the main purpose and everything that is driven is about like harm and that's where the gore comes from, I think that that's when it comes into it being a horror movie. And listen, I've watched enough, Law and Order SVU to be like, okay, the distinction between, if you want to talk about procedural, if you want to just have this as like a psychological thriller as opposed to like actual, horror, I definitely lean on the side of Silence of the Lambs being a horror movie. Jamie?
This is absolute. There's heads in jars. There's faces getting eaten. Like there's no.
Fingernails too. Fingernails.
This is yes, the fingernails. Yes. This is a wild argument that people will make, and they are wrong.
They are wrong. Yes. And producer Brian. Yeah.
I don't think this is a horror movie. I'm just kidding. Of course it is.
Oh my god.
Jamie's face.
Send you
Oh yeah.
divorce papers. I was like, gotta look up a divorce lawyer now.
I obviously think this is a horror movie. I mean, I think if somebody said this is just a psychological like thriller, like okay, fine. Like I'm not gonna like I'm with Kieran. If something scares you, like it's a horror movie. I think Spencer is a horror movie.
Oh
like,
yeah,
that is a
agree with that.
That is a about a woman who is trapped by a wealthy family, like that, and the way that movie depicts her trying to escape and like dreaming of leaving is
so stressful.
It's absolutely a horror movie, just because like 100%. So I think this is a horror movie. However, I have a larger question for the group. One, is The Shape of Water a horror movie? If it is or isn't, does that mean that this is the only movie to win Best Picture that is explicitly a horror movie?
I would say that this is the only one. I think that there's ones that you can debate. I don't find Shape of Water to be a horror movie at all. That to me is a science fiction romance with a little action in the mix. I don't. To me, they're never going for horror. Like they're never going for dread or terror in that one. There can be a monster, but and. The other ones that I hear kind of fringy get brought up. Sometimes people bring up Parasite. And the one I always kind of bring up out of fun, just because there is kind of a monster in the film that you're trying to allude, is No Country for Old Men. Not true horror, really more of a Western thriller, but there is some monster movie vibes to Anton Chigurh a little bit.
Sure. Cool.
Yeah, I don't think Shape of Water is a horror movie.
Yeah.
Having watched it, I'm like, what in the romance craziness is this? Like, it's so insane. Also Octavia Spencer's in it. Yeah, another one where she's running around and it's hilarious to me. But yeah,
Ma. I think you mean Ma is in that film.
Yes, that's exactly what I meant.
Yeah.
Ma's in that film running around trying to help her get her monster man.
Yeah,
oh,
totally.
God.
Yeah. Jamie?
That movie's not, I mean, I guess unless you think that fish fucking is horrifying, then yes. But outside of that.
I would fuck me, would you fuck me?
Oh. Disturbing. Absolutely disturbing. Was
she a big fish monster?
Yeah, and Brian, I'm assuming that you're thinking
that's not a no. I agree with Kieran dead on in terms of what the intent of that movie is trying to do.
Yeah, gorgeous. Well, do we have any lasting thoughts before we move on to our next section? No.
Put the lotion in the basket.
My
favorite quote from the I have a favorite quote from the movie.
Yes.
Which I did not expect. My favorite quote is a Clarice quote where she goes, "Your anagrams are showing, Dr. Lecter."
Oh, that's a good line.
Like so good. Like, oh, I love that. I think that line was my favorite line this time. I told great, perfect.
Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah,
She's
I
great.
love. Oh, Senator, one more thing. Nice suit.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so you just create a Reddit thread in one line, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
And get a couple laughs. Along the way.
Yes. So good. Well, let's go into our next section. Brains.
Tasty.
Which then it takes me to the scene of, I guess it's from the TV show when they're eating brains. Fun times. Which
Man,
I also
the TV show is gorgeous. Like,
Yeah?
I would eat all of those dishes.
Oh my god.
You mean
Well, I got
the people?
confused. Yeah.
Yeah,
people.
they're man. I would eat just to see that beautiful plated like meal in front of me. I'd eat people.
Boy. Well, I when the movie was over with, this movie Silence of the Lambs, I was like, did I miss something? Because I thought I remembered a dinner scene with him and his like orchestra friends, but that was from Red Dragon, not this particular.
Yeah, and then
one.
Hannibal has the Ray Liotta scene at the end.
Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
Yeah, which is like a dinner sequence.
Right. But I was like, I thought there was dinner sequence, but I mean, I didn't miss it. The movie's still just fucking perfect. But all right, mental health. Jamie, my first question to you, because we haven't done this in a couple of episodes. Would love to Billy or Stu, Hannibal and Buffalo Bill.
I mean, I think that they're both Billy.
Okay.
But like different versions of Billy. So if Billy is our more like methodical planning, kind of thoughtful serial killer, I think that like Hannibal Lecter is brilliant and like, you know, is very thoughtful about how he planned his escape. Like again, we were talking about that sequence, and like I made the comment while watching it this time. I was like, how did he do all of that, which with seemingly such little amount of time? Like just his like all of that was wild. So even though like, you know, he whether or not he has like had this plan for a long time, but like he's still just very thoughtful. It wasn't all just like impulse, like I'm gonna get out, you know, like there was a lot of I just think like more critical thinking involved in his planning, and like I think the degree of manipulation is like just so high that it definitely gives more of a Billy vibe. And I kind of think the same thing to a degree with Buffalo Bill, because I do think that he has a very specific plan in mind in terms of like what he's trying to accomplish. Like I think they kind of describe like his seemingly random ways that he's both identifying, you know, potential victims as well as where he's disposing them, that like there's still a plan in his head of how he's doing it. I think the way that he you know, is able to like kidnap this woman in his van is also like thoughtful. The way that he somehow like knew her body type was like very bizarre. You know, I think even though like maybe at the end he is doing what he needs to do to like escape or like evade capture, I do think that like everything else up to that point is fairly like well planned out.
Yeah.
And not like I don't think he's acting. Maybe in the beginning I think they reference it to it like his psychological profile of like that over time he like grew in confidence when it came to like his skills and abilities and things like that, his ability to like kidnap unsuspecting women. So, you know, I think either way it's still kind of pointing to the same kind of like Billy vibes.
Yeah. Which that whole scene was so wild. Her literally stopping what she was doing to help him. And I'm like, girl,
I was
you
like,
live in
oh,
Memphis.
ew, absolutely not.
Absolutely not. Not
Nope.
at night.
Sorry, have fun with your cast trying to lift that heavy ass shit. I have my keys splayed in my hand.
Yes.
And I'm running into my house.
I am running into the apartment. I've lived in Memphis for 3 years. I would never stop for anybody, even in the daytime. Okay, so absolutely not.
Yeah, that's
Great.
big no. Sorry.
Yeah.
Sorry. I am
Sorry.
helpful to a degree, but like you just don't know.
You just don't know.
You don't know who wants to wear your skin as a suit.
Also, like, even if you did know that he's not going to hurt you, I'm getting home from work. I got to help a guy with a couch. I don't know.
I'm
this
tired of
guy.
my
Totally.
It's been a
groceries.
long
I'm
day.
starving.
Yeah, the
My
cat's
cat needs to
hungry.
be
Come
fed.
on.
Yeah.
I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, good luck with your couch, bro. That looks like a tomorrow problem. All right.
Exactly. That was like a tomorrow problem.
Also, who is moving a couch like in the middle of the night?
A serial killer.
Exactly.
There you go.
That's your first clue.
Yeah. You learned something here today, folks. Don't help anyone,
Yeah.
especially at night.
I thought you were just gonna say just don't help somebody move at night, but it's like
I was,
don't
and then I
help,
just said, don't help anyone.
period. Yes.
That'll keep you the
Got it.
safest.
Gorgeous.
Mhm.
Well, my next question is, and of course, I know that you didn't study the minds of serial killers, or maybe you have.
Or
That was a
did I?
side job.
Da-da-da. Just kidding.
Does anyone really want like cereal right now?
No.
Cereal and milk?
No.
Yes.
Only a person.
No.
Great. I'll see myself out.
I'm streaming. See you next Tuesday. So
Way to bring
So-
it back.
got to circle it back. So Jamie, if you had to guess, what do you think is the biggest psychological / like mental trait that most serial killers probably have in common? And then my adjacent question to that is, would you guess more serial killers come to be based on mental disorders alone, or are made based on like systemic oppression or their environment, kind of what they were alluding like Buffalo Bill was?
So I think that probably the most common characteristic is a lack of empathy. Like I
sense.
think that which like also scares me because I do think that we're entering in times where empathy is at an all-time low.
Agreed.
But I think that just like a lack of remorse, lack of empathy, those are probably like the two, most identifiable characteristics. And then in terms of nature versus nurture, the
Age-old question.
lifelong, yeah, exactly. I think that with some characteristics like any kind of sociopathic characteristics, or I guess the more formal diagnosis would probably be like antisocial personality disorder. There are risk factors, so it's not to say that it's like all one thing or all the other thing. So any kind of familial pre-existing mental health issues can definitely increase your risk, which would be more of the like, are you born this way?
Are you born wicked, or is wickedness thrust upon you? Sorry, I had to say it.
Ooh, no,
Ooh.
please. Yeah, because I haven't really thought about this in a very long time. And I'm sure there's probably some. I'm like looking to like I don't even have the DSM-5. Like we're I'm one whole DSM behind. These books are expensive. You'd think that you just get one, being in my field, but they don't give it to you.
They're not just handing them away to like,
They're
"Here's- you got a
not.
license.
Yeah,
Here's a
it's like
DSM
$150 for this book.
Yikes.
Yeah, so I'm just guessing. No, I'm just kidding. But I definitely think that you can learn, like you can experience a significant amount of trauma in your life, and like the impact that it has definitely impacts your ability to empathize with other people, because it's like you've experienced all of these horrible things. How are
Yes.
you able to like connect with and like see other people as human, if you yourself have not been treated as such? I wonder if it's like what the outcomes are like that impact of like nature versus nurture impacting what the outcome is. So like, you know, in some circumstances, I think you can have like other pre-existing components that, regardless of what your upbringing are, you might still be at risk of, you know,
Yes.
having sociopathic tendencies. And then I also similarly think that you can experience like terrible, horrible trauma as a child, and that can also potentially increase your risk. But that's not like, doesn't have to be a guarantee. There's plenty of people who have experienced trauma who have not necessarily become serial killers or are
Exactly. Yes.
sociopaths. So,
I feel like
yeah,
that is way higher.
that they are not. Yes,
Yes.
correct.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah.
this is movies like picking up on like a fun plot point and then spinning it, but like then deeply misrepresenting, you know, swaths of people who just have experienced trauma and are
Right.
not murdering people. So in conclusion, nature versus nurture, man.
Gorgeous. Love it.
Just avoiding answering the question.
No,
That's what
but
I do
you
best.
did answer it.
Nothing is
Love
a
it.
guarantee. It's all just like
Exactly.
increasing risk factors. It doesn't
Yes.
necessarily mean definitively like one way or the other way. And ultimately, like if you're a parent and you see like anything that you're concerned about, or you're a parent and like your child has experienced trauma, like, you know, send them to therapy. Like a therapist can support them in any of these experiences. Just because your child potentially is demonstrating some like sociopathic characteristics doesn't mean that you shouldn't also send them to therapy.
Right.
So
Yeah.
I think that that's like an important piece to reinforce is like, regardless, find support. There is still support out there.
Right. I mean, it's not like they could go wrong. Unless you send them to Hannibal Lecter.
It's like,
but
I think you might have some concerning characteristics you're displaying to me. Like, guess you're a lost cause.
right.
That's it. We're
That's
done.
truly it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we tried.
Right.
Yeah.
Wash my hands of this. Good.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I think Kieran had a question for you, Jamie.
Yes, I actually have a question for each of you. I guess we'll start with Jamie. We are recording this in Women's History Month, and
the women.
This is definitely, obviously, there's a major subtext in this film of women in the workforce and finding their way through a male-dominated world. And one of the questions I have for you is, in your line of work, in your field of work, how has the experience of being a woman in areas that might, be more male dominated, or just how has the dynamic, for better or for worse, of being a woman in your field?
Yeah, I mean, so within my own field as a social worker, social work, I would say, is more predominantly like a female field. Even in grad school, it was mostly like women in my classes, in my cohort. But that being said, like as a mental health professional, I don't think that that's necessarily the case across the board. And I think with social work, like historically, it has taught, like, there are a lot of like historical context of how social work started, like with child welfare and things like that. And that was also like connected to predominantly women. In terms of other mental health professionals, like psychiatrists, for example, like that historically was predominantly men, like, medical fields, predominantly men. So then the overlap of like when you're interfacing with other professionals, sometimes you might notice some different vibes, I'll say. And I think part of it is the profession and like legitimizing professions. Like I think social work has really come a long way in terms of being viewed as like a valid profession to be taken seriously. Part of that comes from like having a licensure process that is comparable to other licensed professionals that are like beholden to the license. You have to follow certain ethics and continuing education requirements, things like that. Like all of that helps legitimize the field. But unfortunately, there are still people who might perceive my field as, only being a case manager or only doing like child welfare, foster care, as opposed to like, doing psychotherapy, which is actually what my job is. So I've definitely encountered, I would say mostly in like hospital social work, because those were places that I interfaced with like doctors and psychiatrists and psychologists. That was a place where I really had to advocate for myself and do a lot of like psychoeducation to other mental health professionals of like, hey, so like just because my educational background is social work, that does not like put me in one singular box of what I can do. Like, actually, I can do a whole lot of things. Actually, I don't need nearly as much schooling as you do to do the same thing that you do. So sorry for all of your student loans. But yeah, so like that I think was an earlier part of my career of like kind of getting used to having to advocate for myself in spaces to like demonstrate that like I am deserving to be here just as much as anyone else, because quite frankly our educational backgrounds are extremely similar. If not, there's like several points of overlap with different theories and methodologies. Like, we're not learning different things, we're not applying different things in clinical practice. We're all doing the same type of work. So yeah, that was it. It has definitely come up, and it bothers me way less because like I have learned to know what my worth is in my profession. But there's still some stinkers out there that still view social work as just a woman's field, or like just caring about the kids or just doing paperwork. And I'm happy to speak to them about what I do.
There's always going to be a couple Dr. Chiltons out there, I guess.
Yeah.
Yes.
God, he was so smarmy.
Wait, I have a follow-up question to that, and maybe it doesn't make sense, but when I used to wait tables, the male waiters would make more tips than the female waitresses, because people are like, wow, he was a really nice waiter, versus the woman is expected to be nice, and so they don't get the extra tip there. Like when we and it was a very weird experience. Do you find that the therapist social work world has like any like reflects that as well, in terms of like, well, she's supposed to be empathetic, well, he was really nice, because we have lower standards for men?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say for myself directly, like as a woman. I'm trying to think of like what I have myself experienced versus maybe what I have observed, which like, again, because I have interfaced with like a lot less men in my field, it's like fewer and far between. But I don't know. I mean, maybe in some ways, like the reception would be harsher because that expectation is like, well, all women are empathetic. Like, it's in their nature to like have empathy for people. And so then like, if you get a weird reaction from someone, you're just like, whoa, what is that? Like from another like female colleague. But I understand what you're saying, and I do think that that comes up in a lot of other spaces. I had a very similar conversation about like parenthood with regards to that, and people making comments on like fathers, like like male parents, and being like, oh my God, look, he changed a diaper. But like when moms or like female presenting are parents and doing all these things, like nobody says anything because it's just expected. So I definitely think that that's probably the case, but I feel like it's harder for me. Also, like I'm doing a lot of individual work, so it's harder for me to like observe how other people are being perceived,
Sure.
as opposed to like, I think in a hospital or when you're working on like a multidisciplinary team with other people, when you're actually able to like see how everyone is interacting with one another.
Yeah,
cool.
That makes sense.
And
Great.
just for Nikisha too, I wanted to ask you, as an actress, how have you experienced and how have you felt about the male female dynamic between director and actress? how has your experience been working under male directors? What are the constants? What have the variations? How has your experience been as an actress with that?
Yeah, and that's a really great question because I haven't worked with a lot of female directors, and I think that's the first problem of it all.
Mm-hmm.
um, and I can only think of two instances, and one was in college, and then one was on the Hamilton tour. In college, I had a female director for a musical. We did Ragtime, but she was actually co-directing, since she was head of the theater department. It was her, the head of the theater department, and a male who was the head of the music department, and they were co-directing together. But you can just tell who people gravitated towards as far as questions was more like for the male as opposed to the female director. A sense of how people acted in rehearsal, like if people were quiet when someone was talking, or those kinds of things. But I will say, when I was on the Hamilton tour, we had a resident director that traveled with us, and for the first time it was a female, and it was a Black female too, so it's coupled with, like, first and foremost, a director should be able to direct everybody, but there are just certain experiences and things that if a female director is directing me, we can connect on more things, especially if the role is centered around some type of like female identifying led like narrative. So I think with Hamilton and in playing Eliza and having another female directing me on like how to present this woman, I think it was more helpful because we could talk about and relate to things. And so I think that it's needed and helpful to have a variety of eyes and people to help in that sense, because how I could be perceiving a moment in the show or an emotional charge in the show could be a reference to how I feel as a female. And if I'm talking to a male director, sometimes we can just see things in a different way. So yeah, I think that it's very apparent in theater. There's not a lot of female directors, but I think it shows when there is. I'll put the show Suffs in this conversation. If you've never seen that, it's Suffragettes. It's an incredible musical that they're actually doing a PBS special on, so there'll be a live cap of the musical. But I think you can just tell, like, it's all female led, and there's female directors and a female music team, and you can just kind of like get the sense of like empowerment in a way that's not cheesy or tropey. And we talk about that in movies too, when we talk about females in horror movies and tropes and stuff like that. And you can tell like who the female directors are and how they portray their female characters and all that stuff. So yeah, I just an ad for more female directors or just letting them into spaces, because they're there, but they're just not given the opportunity sometimes. So I think that we definitely just need to see more of that, because you'll get, I think, more in depth about certain topics and certain things, and not have a lot of all these tropes that we have now.
Good questions.
Yeah.
Good questions.
Yeah, great questions. Thanks, Kieran. Great. Should we Rotten Tomatin this?
Yes, let's Rotten Tomatin this.
Rotten Tomatin.
It's the Rotten Tomatoes game.
Also, while I'm getting the Rotten Tomatin up, something I forgot to mention before is the line that Hannibal says, "Look deep within yourself," and then that's where she gets the clue from. Jamie and I rewound the movie just to hear him say the line. And the line is supposed to be like, "Look deep within yourself." That's how you say yourself, like with those inflections. But he actually says it like separating the your and self, like the title of the actual storage unit, which is super cool because as the actor, he makes it sound natural and not weird. So you don't pick up on it. It's not like he said something weird. Like, she only picks up on it, which makes her more special than you as a viewer. And that totally works. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely does.
It's it's beyond incredible performance from
but yeah, just
and by
like
the way, his other Oscar win could be considered a horror movie too, in The Father.
Oh yeah,
that's
big time. Yes.
I've seen that.
Oh my god, it's all based on a play.
Film. Great.
It's an amazing that movie. Yeah, Alzheimer's is a fucking nightmare.
Yeah.
Okay, Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
Screaming.
What do you think this has on Rotten Tomatoes? And again, we're guessing the tomato meter, not the popcorn meter, which is the critics. Kieran, do you want to go first or last?
I actually genuinely do not know the answer to this. Sometimes I spoil myself on these, but I guess I'll go last.
Okay. Nikisha, you go first.
I want this to be 100, so I'm just gonna go for 100.
All right.
I love it. Are we going big? I'll say
Go big or go home.
97.
Kieran?
I'm thinking just because of the two things, the genre nature of it is horror films are going to probably offset some stuffy critics, and maybe some of the controversial topics at the time. I'll say it's a 94.
So this movie, both the tomato meter and the popcorn meter are the same. They are a 95.
Oh, nice.
So
Good.
Price is Right rule. Kieran wins both Price is Right rules and non-price and closest to.
Come on down.
Critics' consensus reads, director Jonathan Demme's smart, taut thriller teeters on the edge between psychological study and all-out horror, and benefits greatly from stellar performances by Anthony Hopkins and Jodie Foster. That's a good that doesn't feel like an AI-generated sentence, so it's nice.
Pretty good.
Yeah.
That's great.
All right.
God.
Ooh, what do you think this has on Letterboxd? As a reminder, Letterboxd you can rate from 0 to 5 with decimal points. So this time we're gonna go in reverse. Kieran, you go first.
A lot less stuffy, a little more internet criticky on Letterboxd there. So this is going to be pretty healthy. I'm going to go as high as 4.4.
Okay. Jamie?
I'm going to say 4.6.
Oh, wow.
And Nikisha?
Yeah, I was just gonna say 4.0, but yeah.
This has a 4.3. And of course we have to read the 3 most popular reviews.
I'm scared.
Number 3, Hannibal Lecter. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. Gordon Ramsay. Delicious. Finally, some good fucking food.
Absolutely. Yes.
That's so good.
The scariest thing in this movie is the close-up shot of the nipple ring. God, that goes through me. That is the peak of the horror genre.
And of the 90s. Go nipple rings.
Disagree.
And the number 1 review by someone named Melissa.
Oh, God.
If I was Clarice, this movie would have been over in about 20 minutes because as soon as that guy threw his cum on my face, I would have killed myself.
Yes. How do you not immediately go scrub your entire skin off after that?
Oh,
I hate it.
so bad.
Yes.
So bad.
And then a review by one of our friends, Brie Hart's Horror, is y'all gonna watch the scene of him ripping off that dude's face and say it's not horror?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks,
you.
Brie.
Great. So those are those. Okay, let's do the 4 S's.
Yes.
Skull, scare, shakes, and suggestions. The Talking Horrors 4 S's.
The 4 S's are skulls, scares, shakes, and suggestions. We're going to rank them 1 through 10. Skulls is how well this movie handles mental health and human behavior. Scares is how scary is it. Shakes, how do you shake it off? It's a one and done. And then we'll stop there, and then we'll go all through our suggestions. Kieran, let's start with you. Let's get your ratings.
Sure. I'm gonna go with a 9 here. The only point it's coming off is just it's a little bit dated in what it's trying to say. Not that it what it's trying to say has the voice has changed at all, but it's a little cemented in the early 90s. We talked about some of the controversies that went on and off the field, even though I feel like they did kind of address it in a certain way. It was still adjacent with some problematic content. So I can't give it a perfect score on that. So it gets a 9 out of 10, but I think it is covering some great food for thought. And there's a lot for a movie that gets called procedural and all that stuff. It's covering a lot of ground with what it's trying to say and what it's trying to address and the conversation it's trying to have. I just give it the one little point off because there's a little early 90s funk going on there.
So that's your
Skulls.
That's your skull. That's your no, that's your shakes. Or is that your
My skulls?
Okay, cool. And then so your scares.
My scares is a 10. I think that this is just the ultimate in the genre. It's covering heavy duty horror material without being in your face with it. It gets in the back of your brain. It makes you think about that nurse that they were able to save one eye. There's a lot of imagery through verbiage here in this, and the use of the language. And I for a movie that some people don't consider a horror movie, I mean, I think this is a scary movie you can show everyone and scare them, but let them appreciate the horror. So it gets a 10 there. Mm-hmm. And the final category is
shakes.
Also a 10. I mean, this movie just stays with you forever. One of you guys mentioned, I think it was Brian, about the first time you saw the night vision goggles scene. To me, that is, especially in this genre, a telltale sign of how effective something can be. I remember the exact television set where I was standing when I first saw that scene. We'll never forget it. It will always be with me. It just like in the first time in The Shining when I saw the dog character and he's sitting on the bed and it's what did I just watch? Those little moments in the genre are the ones that stay with you the most. So to me, this is a movie that from the first time I saw it till today will always be with me and something I can easily always revisit. So it's 10 there.
Sure. Skins.
Yikes.
Jamie, you want to go?
Sure. For Skulls, I gave this an 8.5, kind of for similar, it's going to feel a little bit off because it came out in 1991. But I do think they're doing a pretty good job and it does feel very real. For Scares, I gave this a 6. I think it's sometimes hard for me to give a good scare score to something that it's been a while since I saw it for the first time. So the impact has kind of been with me for a while. Also I think a lot about what it must have been like to watch this as a fully formed adult for the first time and the impact that it had within the context of that time. But I do still think that this is a pretty horrifying movie for a lot of reasons. And again, the originator of one of my irrational fears. And for Shakes, I gave this an 8.5. I think that this is a pretty iconic movie that is highly, highly rewatchable.
Nikisha?
Yeah. I'm going to give a 9 for Skulls, just with what we talked about, with how much they were letting the psychologists talk to each other. And 5 for Scares, because even when I first watched this, even though it is very unsettling, it wasn't as scary as some other things that I have watched, but still highly enjoyable. And so I'll give it a 9 for Shakes. Love this movie. Incredible.
I gave this an 8 for Skulls. I gave this a 6 for Scares. and this is a 10. If this isn't a 10, I don't know what is.
Yeah, fair.
Yeah.
I don't think I've given a 10 ever.
Let's see. I can tell you right now.
Uh-oh.
You have given...
Jamie's like, no, I haven't. None.
You have given 10s.
Oh, I have?
You've given 4 10s.
Oh.
5
What got
10s.
a 10? What
You've
got
given
10s?
Hereditary. Get Out.
It's also really good.
You gave The Last of Us Season 1 a 10.
Oh, yeah.
Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2.
I knew it was going to be those. I'm sorry. And no,
and
I'm
those
not
are-
sorry. I take it
Those
back.
are your 10s. Nikisha, while we're here, Nikisha, your 10s were let's see. Nikisha shakes Nikisha.
No
Your 10s are Megan,
Oh, yeah.
The Invisible Man.
Ooh, yeah.
That's it.
I didn't even give Get Out a 10. I'm screaming.
Wait, that's not possible. Hold on.
Right.
That's
Brian's
well, maybe you
actively editing
didn't.
the scores here, people.
No.
Maybe I'm gonna give Silence of the Lamb 9.5.
Okay.
Because now I feel bad.
Nikisha.
I know. I kind of want to just give it a 10 now.
No,
You can
gave
do it.
Nikisha. You gave Get Out. Oh yeah, you gave it a 10. Sorry.
Yeah, I was like,
Sorry, I'm an asshole. You gave Hereditary a 10.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it.
Scariest movie I've ever seen in my life.
I gave His House a 10. I'm very free. His House a 10. Hereditary a 10. Midnight Mass a 10. Psycho a 10. Get Out a 10. Rosemary's Baby a 10. The Monster Squad a 10.
I literally was gonna say Jamie's Evil Dead is Brian's Monster Squad.
Yeah.
I Saw the Devil a 10. The Sixth Sense got a 10 from me. Midsommar gets a 10 from me.
These are all great movies.
The Orphanage gets a 10 from me. Wreck got a 10 from me. The Orphanage.
Every time.
The
Can't
Cabin in
not
the
do that.
Cabin in the Woods got a 10 from me.
All right, Brian gave everything a 10. In conclusion.
And this, man, I am very liberal with my numbers.
Yeah.
And my suggestion for this movie is
Monster Squad.
No. I think you should watch Philadelphia. Not a horror movie,
okay.
but it's this director's direct response to this movie, and I think it's worth a watch.
Cute. Yeah. Jamie, what about you?
I put 7. I was like, someone said that earlier, but yeah, I still stand by that.
Yeah. I'm gonna put for more like psychology talk, Smile, or like, therapy things.
One of my favorites.
Yeah.
Kieran, what about you?
Yeah, so I got a nice personal recommendation here with this one, or suggestion here. So another entity that can be considered procedural, and it's certainly heavily influenced by Silence of the Lambs. But my first introduction to horror, and it is going to be the X-Files.
That's a great
work.
Thank God. If you fucking said Longlegs, I would have kicked you out of this thing immediately. No, yeah. X-Files is
I didn't even
great
say
answer.
long legs. Wow, you were like
X-Files was my first introduction to horror, just because it's on Fox and someone wasn't watching me at the young enough age, and I just got sucked into it.
Yes.
But if you don't have the time to go back and watch 24 episodes a season of X-Files, you could check out the X-Files movie from 1998. It holds up super well. It was a big blockbuster movie. At the time was X-Files, I think it's now been post-titled X-Files Fight the Future. But yeah, it's a 1990 film. They do a good job of getting the feeling of the show out there. But if you see the earlier seasons of X-Files, you'll totally get a Silence of the Lambs vibe there. And clearly they were pulling a lot of that with Clarice and with Scully, and it's the FBI and all that, investigating curious cases across the country. So X-Files would be my recommendation.
That's great.
Nice. All right.
So I have one more question for Kieran.
Sure.
I was looking at Rotten Tomatoes. Do you know what the highest rated Rotten Tomatoes Best Picture winner is?
Now, and we're talking tomato meter, I guess. Now, aren't there a few hundreds?
There's no hundreds.
Really?
There are 1, 2, 3. There are 4 99s. However, one is weighted heavier than the other ones.
Okay, because I know sometimes the older films just kind of get away with having like 100. How about, is Rebecca one of them?
It is not.
Okay, I thought for some reason I thought that
Rebecca's
was
number 8 at 98%.
Okay, all right. So I knew it was up there a bit. Schindler's List, probably.
Schindler's List is number 6 at 98%.
Okay. What's the other ones that are just kind of people can't? I mean, how about The Godfather?
Godfather is not there. Godfather is lower
haters
on the list.
It's got some haters. Okay, am I right to say that the top ones are pre-1970?
Not this one.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay. But Casablanca is probably one of them. That's
number 2 at 99%. I'll give you the number 2 at 99% is Casablanca. Number 3 at 99% is On the Waterfront. Number 4 at 99% is All About Eve. Then Moonlight starts at 98.
Okay, Moonlight was going to be one of my guesses. How about Parasite?
That's number 1. Parasite at 99%. My assumption is it's weighted heavier because more people reviewed it. So that 99% is like a much higher percent of the reviews.
Yeah,
is my guess.
I want to say, because Rebecca was another one we did in the first season. I want to say back 5 years ago when we did it, it was 100. And I think some of those older
probably
were,
that's
there
probably
was
the
more
case
hundreds there. But
yeah, I thought that was really interesting, which is why I brought it up.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah,
gorgeous.
Another one. The reason I brought it because like another one that could be argued it's horror.
Yeah,
for sure. All right. Well, that wraps up our episode of The Silence of the Lambs. Thank you guys so much for joining us. Special thanks to Kieran from Best Picture Podcast.
Where
Kieran,
can we?
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah. No. I know. I stole it right from you. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's all good. Please let the people know where they can find you. Yeah.
Yeah. Best Picture Cast. All the socials, all the platforms, just like that. 3 words at Best Picture Cast. We're active on Instagram and X and Blue Sky and all the places. And yeah, the podcast, like I said, we got 5 years worth of content. We've got a lot of coverage. We have new stuff coming out. We just did Forrest Gump. We have next week coming out another one of the big 5 winners. We kind of mentioned that briefly in the beginning here. Big 5 being picture, director, actor, actress, and writing. It happened one night. Clark Gable.
Oh, you hadn't done that
Claudette
yet?
Colbert. No, that's coming out this upcoming week. So
I'll definitely be listening.
Yeah, a lot of fun there. So, yeah. So best Picture Cast. Come find us. We have a lot of fun. So,
and all of those links are in our in the description here.
Cool. Grand. And you can find us at Talk Horror Pod on the Insta, on the TikTok, on the Blue Sky. And producer Brian, where can they listen to us?
You can listen to us wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, YouTube. Hi, YouTube.
Hey.
And then wherever you get your podcasts through audio, of course, Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Rate and review us there. 5 stars, please.
And thank you. Gorgeous. Brian, what quote do you want to end us with?
Well, your anagrams are showing, Dr. Lecter. I love it. It really hit me like a ton of bricks. Like the evolution of their friendship in this, like that was one of the things that stuck out the most during this time, this viewing, which is really fun about this movie because every time I watch it, I can follow a different thread and it pays off in the end, regardless if it's the acting, relationships, themes, drama, horror, whatever it is. At the end of the day, oh my God! Wait, my other gripe, I totally forgot. He's on an island with mostly black people at the end, like in this suit and a hat. Like, you think you're hiding amongst the crowd? Like, what are we doing here?
And a
like,
very bizarre.
In
that weird wig.
Yeah.
It was very strange.
Jamie turned to me, he's like, does he think he's hiding?
Yeah.
Like,
It's like, where
So
do you
funny.
think you are?
yeah, he's on like a
Right.
small island off of Haiti or whatever it is, and like he's like, okay, yeah, that's
Look,
too funny.
in Wikipedia it says the Bahamas, and I was like, how are we?
Oh,
I guess
maybe.
from the book, but I'm like, the movie watchers have no idea where he is.
Yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
I was guessing Haiti just because the French speaking nature of it. They said they were speaking French, but in the
Yeah.
captions, but I don't know.
No clue.
anyway, just
Well.
do better at hiding, man. You know,
Right.
Your anagrams are showing, Dr. Lecter.
Your bag wig is showing, sir.
That also that. Oh my god, it was so bad.
Yeah. It's so good. I love it.
Gorgeous. Well, thanks for listening, guys. Bye.
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 Thanks again, man.